Hello, and welcome to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. I'm Erin DeVos, and I'll be your host for this season. Join us for insightful interviews that explore the work of up-and-coming independent filmmakers from all over the world. If you're passionate about film and keen to learning about the creative process from the future cinema greats, this podcast is a must-listen for you. Our mission is to provide listeners with the engaging and informative conversations about successful and innovative films, including features, shorts, documentaries, animation, and web series from across the globe. The DCIFF Film Chat Podcast is a unique opportunity for independent filmmakers to have their voices heard in a way no other film festival can provide. You can listen to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast on all podcast platforms or visit our website at DCIFF-indie.org/DCIFF-podcast. Thank you. Hello, Film Chat fans. I'm your host, Erin DeVos, for another episode of the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking with the filmmaker Julia, who directed Dragonfly. I really loved our conversation. We were able to dive in to the landscape of animation, the different style that she chose, and the inspiration behind this beautifully created animated film. Without further ado, let's dive in. Thank you, Julia, so much for joining the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. I'm really excited to be speaking with you today. We are chatting after the fact of the film festival, and I know Maria, your animator, had a chance to join us. We definitely missed you there as well. So I wanted to thank you for taking the time and to talk about your film today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And to start, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and as well as the nominated film?
Sure. I am sort of a multi-hyphenate. I'm a writer, producer. I I always say I direct out of necessity. If I could afford to hire directors, I probably would. But I've been saying that for a lot of years, and I've been directing my own stuff. So maybe I just need to accept that I'm also a director at times. And my background came from acting. So I started in theater way back in the day and moved to Los Angeles at a pretty young age to pursue a professional acting career. So most of my experience in film and TV is in acting, which I continue to do at times, but it has been a little bit slower since the pandemic and then the strikes. And then my animated short film, Dragonfly. In short, it's about the Tokyo Firebombing of March 9th through 10th, 1945. And it's inspired by the lives of my maternal grandparents in Japan, whom I actually never met. So it's sort of a fictionalized homage to them based on a very true and very tragic moment in history. And it's part of something I've been working on for a long time. I think I want to say in my early 20s, I got the bug to start researching my family history. And one of the things I started with was interviewing my parents. And at some point, I asked my mom if she knew what her parents may have experienced during World War II. And at that time, all she remembered being told at some point was that at some point, her parents were living in Tokyo, and then there was a big fire, and they had to move back to the family farm in Komodo. And that was that. And then sometime later, I started sort of writing a script inspired by all these interviews I had done. And I basically Googled like Tokyo, big fire, 1945. And that was honestly the first time that I had ever heard of the Tokyo fire bombings. And it was very interesting to me. Like I mentally noted, reading about it, this was a huge tragedy. There was a huge number of deaths and casualties, and feeling kind of like, why had I never heard of this before? And that's sort of what sparked sort of a focusing on that particular time in history to tell this story.
Ah, wow. Yeah, no, truly to be able to, not only discover like the events, but to be able to tell the tale in such a animated and beautiful way. I thought the film was very well done and beautifully orchestrated as well. So I want to congratulate you on that. And Related to the film, knowing that it's about Dragonfly, would you say that's kind of like a metaphor of the title or overall theme too?
Yeah, it's sort of it's like a thematic symbol. I understand that the dragonfly is actually represented a lot in different cultures.
Mhm.
I've learned and read since then. But some of the stuff that I read early on about Japan specifically was just how it's this representation of transformation, and as well as I don't know if it still is, but at the time, like circa World War II for us, it represented sort of this war victory. And I believe it's because the dragonfly never retreats, it never flies backwards. It only always flies forward. So there's like the war representation, the transformation, sort of rebirth representation of it. And then also something that probably from those interviews that my mom told me when she was a little girl living on the family farm, she said she used to capture dragonflies. She said she used to torture them. And I have since learned more information, which okay, still possibly true. But what she would do, I got some clarification just recently. She loved dragonflies so much that she would capture them. She would take off their wings because she didn't want them to fly away. She wanted to keep them as pets. So she would build little houses for them, take off their wings, put them in the houses so they couldn't fly away, and feed them. And she says apparently they did actually survive for a bit of time like
Oh,
that.
wow.
So that's the other reason, that's the other reason that the dragonfly sort of, is represented in the film so much.
I never knew that much about dragonflies too, that they only fly forward and backward or not backwards. And so I feel that's a really good way of seeing the film in the sense of just being able to move forward, be able to see the past, but also what the future has in store. So I thought that was beautiful. And do you mind sharing like a little bit about the creative process behind it?
Sure. I mean, it was a long it was a long process. It was a wonderful learning experience. So Maria Martellonero, did you get to meet her in person at the fest or?
I did, yeah, for a brief
Okay,
time. Yes, definitely.
for like a minute. Yeah, so she came on board to this project in the early days, so 2019. So she's been on the project with me for a long time. And my background in filmmaking had not yet crossed over into the specific world of animation. So I needed to find somebody who was okay with that, was willing to work with me and sort of have it be a learning experience for us both. And we started off, I think, in 2019 and 2020. Before I had all the funding, we started off with storyboards, and she created the original storyboard animatic so we could get a sort of a visual of the entire project as well as get a sense for the timing. And then it wasn't until the end of 2020 that I crowdfunded and got the financing that I need to be able to pay her. Around probably January of 2021, Maria and then our lead animator, who is Maria's partner in their animation company, Roly Poly Animation, Ava came on board to help Maria with the project. And that's early 2021 is when they actually started doing most of the heavy lifting of animation. And everything is 2D computer animation. The storyboards and the character designs were hand drawn, but everything was ultimately animated in the computer. And this is like stuff that Maria has had to explain to me. But using Adobe Anime, and then she did post-production animation in Adobe After Effects. And part of the process was as we went along, Maria would update the storyboard animatic so it was more detailed and exactly the timing. Look at this, approve it, and then no changes, right? So she'd get it to that level. And once I approved it, Ava would take over the sort of the tedious, busy work of actual animation. And then she would send it back to Maria, who would do the animation post production. And we kind of, because of our timeline and our limited budget, we kind of had to go as we went. So, like, usually the pipeline is you'd have like a full locked storyboard animatic before you start animating, right? But we were just kind of like going as we went, just Maria would stay one scene ahead with the storyboards, and then Ava would like animate behind her. And I just kind of had to cross my fingers that as a whole film, it would work and the pacing would work. And it did. And ultimately, I think in the very, very end, when we had the whole big picture, there was very, very minor changes at that point. And yeah, I mean, it was just kind of amazing, just kind of seeing it come to life over the years. And once we were picture locked, I think that was in March of 2023. Truthfully, the sound designer, Georgia Garcia Moreno, and then our composer, Aiko Fukushima, they both had a very, very short amount of time to do sound and music before our premiere in May. So they really like hold it and really, really sort of like brought in those final touches for the project.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I mean, to go through the length of process and also to work as you're going, because I know, animation takes so much work, and I give you all the credit and, with Maria and your other crew members too, just be able to process this together. Had you always imagined, well, knowing that this would be an animated film, but also like the styles, have you played into that, or you knew what type of style animation you wanted to do going into it?
I think early on when it was like just me and Maria, I had put together sort of like a pitch deck to pitch to people like her with images that I just pulled from other already existing films. So the scenes set in 1956, which are the scenes in color, are very sort of Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli inspired. And then the scenes set in Tokyo in 45, which are black and white, I think that was just a combination. And I can't specifically think of film titles, unfortunately, right now, but there were a number of sort of short films that I had found online that I probably just Googled like short films, animated short films in black and white, just to kind of see how people did that. But I know early on I wanted, the 756 to be color and kind of to be watercolor inspired. And then the stuff in Tokyo to be black and white and either be charcoal or sort of graphite or even ink inspired. I was like, this is pretty much how I was talking to Maria in the early days. Like maybe like pencil, ink. What do you think? Like something like that.
Yeah.
And then that's like the amount of information I gave to her. And then she went back early on. She did like test images and just played around with it. And I was basically like, yep, that looks awesome. Cool. Let's do this. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. No, I mean, that's so cool. I mean, to be able, to work collaboratively so close together and working with animators and bringing the vision to life, it's such a unique dynamic. And as you're directing and, going through the other elements, it's just, one big part of it. So
Yeah.
that's very cool. And thinking on that, what would you say animation there's so many different forms, so many different avenues that I feel as filmmakers that we take down or, the roads we want to go down. Thinking about like some of the challenges that are happening in the industry, how do you feel animation is going forward? I feel like it's really expanded also in the past few years. So,
Well, I think, and this is something that I feel less qualified to answer specifically about animation, but it's becoming more and more accessible for people to, in a sense, almost, and not necessarily like promoting this because I know it's maybe controversial, but to self teach themselves online with tutorials and with the software that's available today. And a friend of mine actually, Charlie Frail, who works specifically in VFX animation. So she does sort of CGI for like big superhero movies. She was talking about how recently I was talking to her about how more and more people you can find tutorials and self teach yourself. If you have the software, you can sort of self teach yourself. And something that's happening more is using video game development software for film as well. And it allows it's this stuff that's explained to me, and I'm like, that's kind of over my head, but cool. Is like it's kind of unlimited because you can create these 360 worlds environments and essentially within the software move the camera in any direction you want. So instead of having to reanimate frame by frame every time you want a different angle or you want the quote unquote camera to move, There's software now that just does it for you. Once you've animated or created, drawn that initial environment, it just does it for you. So I think it's more accessible. But I also think what's really interesting is the combination of animation and live action. I mean, how much of like a superhero movie is technically animation? It's like a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how that sort of level of work, if it is more accessible and more affordable for people to do on the indie level, and having people be able to, whether they're trying to do animation or they're doing live action, but they need like CGI, special effects or environments, to see more of that sort of work on the independent level, assuming that the accessibility also means affordability. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see that happen. And also at the same time, I love like when I watch some of the other, I go to festivals and watch the animated shorts. I also just love seeing the ones that look super classic, hand drawn, even if they're not, that look hand drawn or look really simple. And the one style that sort of baffles me, that impresses me so much, is stop motion, like either claymation or using puppets. I see the behind the scenes videos of that kind of stuff, and I'm like, it just looks so cool. That always impresses me.
Absolutely. And the fact that there's so many different styles that I know you've touched upon, it takes so much time. And you brought also a good point about the live action and CGI and how that's really up and coming, and how we wish that, or I'm hoping for, like, for independent filmmakers to have more access to that too, to be able to develop and explore. And yeah, a lot of people have been doing self-learning too. And we also at DCIFF have a program, or we're looking into expanding our animation program that much more. And so to be able to, work with the filmmakers who are in the community, to be able to have access to these tools or be able to play around with it. So right there in alignment with you.
Yeah.
Well, definitely thinking like the broader scope of things, and how, as filmmakers, or some of us are just starting out, what would be the best advice that you can share?
I don't know if this is the best one, but this is definitely an important one, I think, is especially when you're starting out and sort of your resources are limited, focus on passion. So I know everybody's heard that, over and over, and we're probably tired of hearing it. But when you're in it for the long haul, and when you have a limited budget and everything is going to take longer than you think it should, at the very least, you want to be super passionate about the story. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be specifically personal, like true story personal to you. Although I do know a lot of filmmakers where that's what that's the direction they go. That's what helps, sort of light that passion for them. But, it has to be something thematically that you just really, really believe in and really need to tell. And I would say one of the next big things is the importance of who you work with. And that can mean so many things, because like I love working with my friends, which I do at times, and it can be a different type of project. In low budget filmmaking, we ask for a lot of favors. So just be sure you keep track of your favors. And as a producer, I always say you can like not pay somebody once. If they're a friend, you can maybe not pay them once, and then just don't make that a habit, because, we all want to get paid for our time and our talents and not be taken advantage of. And I know it's so hard, but just trying to find a way, especially with things like crowdfunding now, making the financing aspect a little bit more accessible, at least on the low budget scale. Also, like, don't put all your eggs into one basket, because that's something that I always do. I always have like the passion project, and then like maybe little projects, or like I'm doing things for people I know or friends, or like getting hired to do other things. And then I have like my passion project, and my sort of, I don't know if it's a mistake, but something that hasn't served me necessarily is like I don't mind having lofty goals for my projects, but what I do mind is putting all my eggs in one basket and like deciding mentally, somehow convincing myself that this project is the end all be all. Like, this is the one that's either gonna launch my career or finally get finally make its money back or whatever it is, like that thing. And then kind of have to manage your expectations. So as disappointments happen, they don't sort of bring you down. And it's so interesting. I've been in this industry long enough to just like be rejected, thousands of times in different ways. But it's still, every time it happens, it's still like a little like chip, a little chip to the soul. So I'm trying to find ways to like let it go.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. No, I think that's all really great, well-rounded advice and, the passion piece and just be able to continue to keep going. Because I feel as filmmakers, we really need to hear that no matter what, especially with like the recent strikes and what has happened in Hollywood and the fact that don't set back your dream based on certain realities or certain like challenges that may be out of our control, but to be able to keep going and, utilize your network. But yeah, definitely remember the thank yous and, who to be, grateful for in that process. So I thought that was really well-rounded.
Perfect.
Cool. And then before I ask my final question, was there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to share?
I don't think so. I think you've covered it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I know that's a hard question to ask, but I really appreciate your time, Julia, and for joining us for the podcast today. Where can we follow you along in your journey?
Let's see. I am on Instagram and still technically on Twitter at Julia Morizawa. And then I have a website, juliamorizawa.com, where you can, I try and update it. But if you ever want to reach out to me, you can find contact information on there.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll definitely share it in the show notes so everyone's able to connect with you and follow you along. So absolutely.
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
This podcast is brought to you by the DCIFF supporters. We could not be here without all of you to be sharing this amazing outlet with filmmakers from around the world. If you are interested in supporting DCIFF, head on over to our website through the link description in the bio of this episode, or you can go right to the website, which is DCIFF-INDIE.org, to connect with us and learn more about our Future of Film programs, our festival, and also more educational opportunities in what we do with our high school students, community, and beyond. We look forward to your support.